versus Serena from 1982.
Well, girls, the reason I call you is because I have a part for the hottest girl in motion pictures. And I have made my research, and I have narrowed down to two girls. You, Mai Lin, are very, very hot nowadays, and Serena, of course, you are also tops. My problem is I do not know which one of you two is really the hottest one.
Well, Mai Lin, I think you're coming along just fine, but I think I can still outdo you.
Oh, you think so? Would you like to make a bet?
A bet? What kind of a bet?
$1,000.
Carlos, how much for the lead?
Very nice. $25,000.
Mai Lin, would you be willing to bet the part?
What do you mean?
I mean $25,000 and a film role.
That sounds good. You're on.
Okay.
Before Godzilla vs. Kong, before Freddy vs. Jason, in 1982 we had Mai Lin vs. Serena, directed by Carlos Tobalina, who has directed a couple of films I've seen, including Jungle Blue, and what was the other one that I've seen that I am blanking on the name of? Doesn't matter right now, but anyways, Carlos Tobalina himself even makes a small cameo in the film. Something of a meta film in its own right. We follow Serena playing herself and Mai Lin playing herself. They're vying for the role, the lead role, and $25,000 in Tobalina's new film. And they've got to find out, he doesn't know how hot they actually are. As he says, he has to find out who is the hottest and who can get the role. And what do they decide to do? They decide to go out there and have a bunch of crazy sex with people in a lot of public places, no matter what. I don't know if it's about the body count or if it's about just being the dirtiest. I really have no idea. But either way, Serena and Mai Lin are not going to pass up an opportunity to be in another of Carlos Tobalina's films. So, all right, man, Mai Lin versus Serena. Well, it's an interesting film because the plot is very paper thin on this one. Like I said before, the plot is essentially that Carlos himself, he has a small part in the film, and he gives a setup to the film, and it's not really like he's out there kind of like judging them. Sort of like what you could have had is him maybe going around being like, all right, like challenges, like, yeah, I challenge you to go into this restaurant and, I don't know, pick up these guys or go into this place and do this. I don't know. He is really the bookend of the film where he talks to them at the beginning and then at the end to kind of be like, well, I'm going to tell you who won the role, and, you got to see the film to find out who won the role. And right off the bat, I mean, right from the first scene, it's got to be said, the acting is rough. The acting's really rough on this one. I don't like to point out the acting in particular with a lot of films because I don't want to take kind of cheap shots at anybody, and that's not what I intend to do at all. I want to try to criticize without, taking kind of any personal jabs. But right from the start, that the dialogue delivery between all three of them comes off as very flat, very much like you say your sentence, pause. You say your sentence, pause. You say your sentence, pause. It doesn't really flow. It's not very natural. It comes off as very rough. But anyways, I mean, right off the bat, you're talking about like, well, why doesn't the man just cast both of them? And I gotta tell you, I don't know why. I guess there's only one lead role, and they've got to vie for it. So that means going out there and picking up a bunch of guys, a bunch of girls, and there's a pattern in this film, which is uncleanliness that I noticed. Because right off right from the beginning, they go to this restaurant. And now what immediately kind of caught my eye is that, so if Serena and Mai Lin are playing themselves, then, alright, maybe there's some fourth wall breaking here and there. But when they get to this restaurant, man, I mean, in the corner of the frame, it's very obvious that they're on a set. And I was waiting for them to be like, oh, okay, maybe they'll acknowledge this. Maybe they're on a film set. Maybe this and that. No, man, it's just the giant corner of the frame. and it is just wild, man. I'm like, man, what? That's right in the frame right there. There's no. It's so obvious that I'm like, okay, the fact that it's this obvious right now means they're gonna make a point to it. And nope, they never bring it back up. And then as well, you have one of the actors in the film. I mean, they cut over to him, and there's a full-on microphone on his desk. I mean, the wires hanging down. And again, I'm thinking like, oh, well, they're probably gonna point it out. Maybe they're on a film set. Maybe they're like, oh, hey, Serena, Mai Lin, get out of here. You know, we're making this film. But no, because only a couple seconds later, when they cut back to the gentleman, the microphone is gone. So I'm wondering, like, okay, so was that an accident? Was that intentional? Also, I find it funny that when they actually walk to the restaurant, it sounds like they did some ADR on the footsteps, but it sounds like they're in a warehouse because these two are walking outside on a sidewalk, and it sounds like they're echoing, like in like a small, not a small room, but it sounds like they're echoing in like a warehouse or like some sort of closed-in environment. So that really kind of immediately sort of took me off guard. But yeah, man, I mean, this restaurant's gonna be shut down because at a certain point, everyone starts getting in on it. They're on the tables, they're loving each other, they're swinging all around. It's wild as all hell, man. They have one of these guys who's like, oh, what is this? One of those, how you say, swinging restaurants? And I'm thinking, brother, I would not be eating at a swinging restaurant because I feel like that food, you cannot. I mean, you got like Kramer in the shower, making salad. I trust that more than food from a swinging restaurant. It's funny. I was watching that documentary recently, American Swing, about the club in New York where all the swingers went. And they were talking about the buffet there, and I was thinking above all else, man, I ain't no way I'm eating a buffet at a damn swingers night, man. Not that I'd be there at a swingers night, but oh my gosh, man, it's just like don't eat that food, man. Good and damn well they ain't gonna be washing their hands on that. But yeah, and right off the bat, I think two of the things I keep saying right off the bat, but you get what I'm saying. Two of the things that really kind of caught my eye in terms of the technical value is that the audio firsthand I think is a little tricky sometimes in terms of what some of the dialogue is. There are just sometimes, like especially in this scene, when you have some of the actors in the background, and when I say in the background, I mean literally in the background. They're entering into the foreground, and one of the actors is saying some dialogue, and there's no subtitles on this, so I don't know what he was saying. There's an echo that's really kind of pervasive and really kind of muffles over the primary dialogue in this, so I really don't know what he's saying. And as well as the camera work in this is questionable because there are times where it seems like they don't really know what they're focusing on. The camera will oftentimes, and more than one sequence, will zoom in and stop and then zoom into another part and then kind of move the camera around where it's sort of like, we don't really know what we're focusing on. Are we waiting for something to kind of show up? Are we, and nothing really ever happens. So I think the fact of the matter is that it doesn't really feel like a whole lot of preparation was really kind of put into some of these sequences, man. It really does kind of feel like, whatever happens on camera happens on camera. And that'll come into play later with the final scene of the film, the big kind of climactic sort of big love fest. We'll get to that when we get to that, anyways. But yeah, strange kind of slow motion shots. But there is some good slow motion in these sequences. It happens a couple of times where I think the slow motion is actually done very well. The soundtrack in these parts is done well as well, I should say. And the film's credit, lists a John Rando, a Jay Rando, which I'm just gonna take a while to say that really ain't his name. But the soundtrack, at least for the first part, is solid. It's got some good guitars. This sequence, during some of the slow motion shots, the music really does help, and I think actually is. At least for the first half, it really does kind of stand out as being unique. Something that you really like. Oh wow, the soundtrack on this is really solid. And then later on, when I'm talking about the audio, an issue that I had with the film that was happening a couple of times is that the audio was cutting out. Now I'm listening to this, I should say, with headphones on. So perhaps, I'm getting an extra kind of, I'm getting a better hearing that way. But there were times where you could hear that the dialogue would just cut. And I mean cut as in when it was recorded, the background fuzz is cut. Like you can hear it when it ends, when it starts, and then as well, more bizarrely, was when the actors would actually be saying dialogue or they'd be moaning, or they'd be, doing some ADR or reacting in a certain way, and then it would just cut mid-word or mid kind of effect. And at first, I'm like, well, maybe there's just a hiccup in the audio, but this happened, I counted 3 different times, so it was really threw me off. I'm like, man, this is so strange that this has happened as many times as it had. Like I said, I happened in the diner scene, and then or the restaurant scene, I should say. It happened in the jail scene, and then it happens at the end when the audio is really kind of thrown out the window at that point, overall. But yeah, no, it's funny because so they're going around place to place trying to pick up guys, and they go to this bar. And so you have Mai Lin there, and she looks over at just 2 girls sitting next to each other, and she immediately knows. She's like, "Wait, is this a gay bar?" And they're, what? Would you believe they're the only two? They're the only 2 people in the bar, but it is a gay bar, in fact. And in this scene we have Herschel Savage, we have Mike Horner. And they kind of walk into frame, man. I don't know what they're doing there. They're like, "Oh, what's going on? Hey, you guys, crazy, sex going on here." I'm like, "What are these people doing here at the damn lesbian bar?" I don't know. The bartender, I don't know. I think I might be mixing my actors there, but I don't know that actor, at least not to my knowledge. I might be mixing him up with somebody else. I do apologize. But he looks befuddled. He's watching all this stuff going on. He's like, "Hey, man, let me get my glasses out of the way. Let me move my table out of the way." He's a smart businessman because he doesn't want to get any sort of dirt, any sort of grease on his, glasses, on any of his silverware. Because, hey, man, it's sort of like you don't want to be shut down for good. But lo and behold, they get in trouble, man. They end up being brought over to jail, man. It's a real kind of shame. And they're saying that, like, I also gotta say, it's one of the actors in that scene, one of the actresses, I should say, in that scene. I think her name was Susan or something. She had one line that was cracking me up. She's talking about, "Oh, I'm a fan of Serena, I'm a fan of Mai Lin." She's like, "I've seen those movies and they're really pornographic." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, man, they are pornographic films, like they are. It's ridiculous, man." Anyways, yeah, man. So, anyways, they're sent off to jail. They use their tactics to find a way to get themselves out. Even though at this point, I guess they're just kind of keeping track of what's going on. There's not really any sort of measurement from Carlos Tobalina because he, like I said, he disappeared from the movie, so anything can really happen, man. But yeah, then finally you get to the big kind of climactic final 20 minutes or so, and let me tell you, it's probably one of the smelliest sets I've ever seen in a movie. Where I'm watching this and I'm like, man, there's no way that's any of that smelled okay. It is just a big old group orgy. Everyone in there they look sweaty. I mean, they look sweaty. They look like they smell. Oh, I also got to say one thing about the prison scene that was cracking me up. Is that what I'm talking about before with the camera work being kind of shoddy. So at the end of the scene, man, the camera is zooming in, but it's not really zooming into anything, and it's moving all around, and then it just goes out of focus and awkwardly kind of cuts. It's like, man, what is going on here? It's sort of like there's no real kind of rhyme or reason, just these sort of things happen, and then the camera sort of stops. But anyways, at the end of the film, you get a whole big scene. You get a bunch of guys and all that. They're having a lot of fun. They're having a good time. But boy, man, this scene really does go on. I think a big problem with the film is that, I mean, when I'm watching this sort of thing, I am looking for more of a plot. And if they're not, then hey, I've talked about a couple of these films where the plot is very light. But to me, I found a lot of this kind of dull. I found, if the camera work isn't really exceptional, if the soundtrack, which for the first half is pretty solid, but that has a drop off at a certain point where it becomes very muffled and becomes just part of the background, to the point where you can really barely hear it, then I'm just kind of sitting there, waiting for the scenes to end. There's nothing really kind of to keep it going. The film itself is not long at all. It's 80 minutes. I mean, just barely. Some versions I've seen even put it like at 77 minutes or so, or at least some runtimes that I've seen. However true that is, I really couldn't tell you. But a lot of this, man, I was just kind of spacing out during the more erotic kind of scenes. It really does just kind of go on to a point where I really found myself just not terribly interested. But yeah, I mean, with that final scene, yeah, it really goes on, and I think there's a big part of that is a lot of improv. There's a lot of audio that's overlaying each other, a lot of dialogue that's on top of each other. I mean, there's one point you hear a dude off camera yelling at one of them, and I'm thinking, okay, well, is this going to be a fourth wall break where, hey, we're on the set of a movie and, this and that. There's a lot of cool stuff you could do with that, man. You can actually have these performers, be like, oh, we're in a movie, we're going to get on a movie, and all that. But they don't really do that. And the fact that there are so many, that there are instances where, like I said before, the set is, the set cutoff is right in frame, and you see the microphones and the shots, and then you have people yelling off camera into it. It all just kind of comes off, man, as sort of very rushed, very kind of quick, and that's fine if you're just looking for a kind of wham bam thank you ma'am, go for it. But for me, I really just didn't. Wasn't crazy about this film, man. I really kind of thought this was a bit of a chore to get through at times. And it's, as talented as Mai Lin and Serena are in some of their other films. I think Serena is just a real beautiful woman. And Mai Lin is very attractive as well. I think they're both very good. It's just kind of a shame that you're going to put these two together and then not really give them a whole lot to do with. It really kind of puts a damper on the whole mood. But anyways, yeah, man. So the audio at that point is just totally out the window. I mean, there's audio cuts. There's just there are noises in the background. Dialogue you can't hear. You hear guys just kind of saying random stuff that feels so improvised, and it's almost like there was a note that I made before. One of the cops who was like stuttering his dialogue that was cracking me up. What does he say? He says, yeah, I think it was Billy D. I think I said, he's like, oh, there's two pretty girls, and it was like, man, you couldn't do another take of that. What's going on here, man? Anyways. But yeah, a lot of the camera work that kind of plagues the rest of the film. A lot of awkward camera work, a lot of just random zooms. And there was one dude he was cracking me up. It's like I don't know if they forgot to cut this out or what, or they didn't know what to do. There was a dude who was like right in the center of the frame, and he looks like he's going pretty wild on himself. You think like, oh, he's gonna have a good, it's gonna be a good shot right here, and then no, it just cuts, and they even like zoom into the dude think he's gonna do it, and then no, he doesn't. And I'm just like, man, why is this guy even in the frame here? It just seems like I don't know why they didn't just cut out a lot of this stuff. It seems very kind of like building up to something that never really kind of concludes, And the scene itself, it just goes on and on, man. It's just, there's one shot that was genuinely one of the grossest things I've ever seen in any adult film. There's like a shot, I don't know if it was just a filter or the lens or what. There's like a shot of like the water in the bathtub, and it was like orange, man. It was one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen in any adult film. But yeah, it wants to break the fourth wall, but it doesn't really go far enough. And then the ending really kind of, it doesn't really work altogether, man. It really is just sort of like, there are some moments where I think where the directing is okay during the erotic scenes, but for the most part, the whole thing just feels very rushed. It feels very quick, because you have those directing I should say those the camera work and the audio hiccups that really kind of take you out of it, man. Yeah, I mean, I have some acquaintances who really like this film, and that's great. I get the appeal. Like I said, I think Mai Lin and Serena are both very talented in their own right. I think they are both really solid actresses, but this, man, I really just wasn't crazy about. This isn't one of my favorites that they've been in, and I think this is really more so than anything else a real kind of missed opportunity. So, yeah, Mai Lin versus Serena, I wouldn't really recommend it, but if you're a fan of these actresses, I would say then go for it if you're enough of a fan to sit through this. Currently, this is out of print on DVD. This is on a Peekarama DVD with Oriental Hawaii, also with Mai Lin. But like I said, that DVD is out of print, so if you want to see it, you'll have to just track a copy down on its own or find another way to watch it. But that is Mai Lin versus Serena. Thank you guys for listening to this episode. I appreciate it. And we'll be back next time for another film. Thank you